Folks, I wanted to take you on a walkthrough of Module 1. Sorry about the delay. I've had some technical difficulties, but I think I've figured them out. Uh, if all is going according to plan, the image from the first page of Module 1 is on the screen, and so you'll see it along with hearing me. Module 1 is called Think Deep. In Module 1, you get your feet wet with the material, and you start the journey that you're going to be on for 8 weeks that culminates in a paper in which you explore a reading and you analyze the efficacy of the argument made by the author in that work. And I'll explain more on Thursday when I see you. But this is when you go to Brightspace and you click on our course and you click on Module 1, you'll see this image and you'll see the text underneath it. You'll notice that there's assignments that are numbered 1-1, 1-2, and each assignment will have a name. Like this assignment 1-1 is a discussion, and it is called the class mixer. It is ungraded. For the class mixer, you just go in, introduce yourself to your peers, and it's just a way to get to know each other. But again, it's ungraded, so while I highly recommend doing all of the available activities in every module, there are some that are going to be graded, which means they count towards your ultimate grade in the course, and there are others that are good practice, but they are not graded. 1-2 is a video looking closer at your everyday life. And so with the videos, you'll notice that there'll also be a transcript that goes with them. And the wording down here is either part of the transcript or part of the context, the background, or whatever you're going to see. You'll be able to distinguish between the two as you read through for each module. We'll see pages 2 and 3 here from Module 1. And so you want to watch that video for Module 1-2 because in Module 1-3 it's going to ask you about a moment of critical thinking in real life. So the video captures a moment of critical thinking in everyday life to give you an idea of what they're talking about. And then in 1-3, this discussion, which is graded, it's going to ask you to talk about a moment in real life where you use critical thinking. So in your initial post, you want to provide that in detail, and then you want to respond to 2 of your peers. The initial post is due by Thursday at 11:59 p.m., and the responses to your peers are due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Sunday by 11:59 p.m. is the typical time that assignments are due, with the exception for our course being the initial post for discussion, which has to be the Thursday prior to that Sunday, so people have time to respond to what you've written. In activity 1-4, reading, preparing for submitting your writing notes, it gives you an idea of what you're going to be asked to do for this particular module's main assignment, which is the writing notes. And so it makes a connection between what it just had you do and what it's going to ask you to do, and it talks about the difference between literal and analytical digging into a subject, either literally or digging deeper and looking at it analytically. And here it distinguishes between literal reading and analytical reading. Literal reading is when you're reading at face value. The literature is surface level when you read it from this approach. And you're just literally taking from it what it says on the surface. You're not thinking about symbolism or thinking about anything really all that deep in it. So they provide you an article, Cup finds sweet home back in Chicago. And so if you were to read this article, you'll have lots of details about what happened during the game, who scored the 2 goals for the Blackhawks, and some other information. So surface reading is pulling out those facts that are given to you in the text. And so it'll talk to you also about other forms of communication that might be more at this literal level, like a text message or like an email. And then, or a street sign. Obviously, we don't want our street signs to be so obtuse as to require analytical thinking. We want them to be at face value because we need to know what they say immediately so we can follow what they say. But then it says when you engage in literal reading, you will have a gut reaction to the text. For example, if you see a stop sign when driving down the road, your gut reaction will hopefully tell you to stop. Now, the advantages of literal reading: it's quick, it's pretty easy, it offers information immediately, which can be helpful, like I said, with the street signs, and it offers universal understanding. There isn't really a cultural bias to it because you don't need to have familiarity with A, B, and C in order to appreciate a street sign telling you to stop. Universally, we understand that there's times when, if you're driving, you're going to need to stop your car. The disadvantages, though, it may gloss over some key significance in the text. We may not pick up the nuances, any implied information or suggestions may be overlooked, and we may miss the bigger picture or overall context if we are simply reading for surface level. And so on the next page right over here, it gives you examples of a literal reading model. So read the following excerpt from Frederick Douglass's narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, and click on the highlighted sections to see examples of reactions that come from a literal text end. So you would click anywhere on the text and it will tell you exactly what the literal reaction might be. It gives you a little bit of a context for who Frederick Douglass is, and so go into the text and look at it. And it gives you a little descriptor before the next part too. Douglass then describes how he learned how to read. He does this principally by doing some errands very quickly, bringing his book with him, and asking the local children to help him read. And the narrative concludes with Douglass telling a story and speaking with some Irishmen who suggested that he should run away to the north where he could be free. So a literal reading of these passages gives us several pieces of information. For example, Douglass lived with Master Hugh for 7 years, where he learned to read and write, and his mistress taught him the alphabet. There are deep meanings to be inferred from this passage, but a literal reading just gives the facts. Whether writing a story, an email, or a cover letter, or college essay, the author must first consider their audience. Simply put, when writing, the audience is the intended reader. This reader could be from the general public, a classmate, a family member, a boss, an instructor, etc. Identifying the audience is important when writing because the author wants to be sure, in such a way as also known as a writing style, that reflects the writer-reader relationship. So for example, if your audience was a classroom of second graders, you're going to communicate very differently than if you were presenting information on the same subject matter to a classroom of your peers. So that's a little, almost an aside, this audience consideration. You're going to be asked your audience or who you think the intended audience is for the piece of reading that you ultimately choose that will follow you along for this course and that you will write a paper on ultimately. And that's where we get at with 1-5 quiz. So we see here it's graded, so this is something you have to do. Well, if you want a grade, you have to do it. And so you're basically going to be asked some pretty simple questions, almost like a Cosmo magazine style quiz about your preferences. And then it's going to recommend one of the 3 articles for you to read. You can choose to read that article or not, it's up to you. And then 1-6 styles back to the reading, Introduction to the Writing Center. I will talk to you more about the Writing Center, but just know that in the announcement I posted earlier, it tells you a bit about the online Writing Center and what it does and how it can help you. This gives more information right here. 1-7, Writing Notes. This is graded. This is the, I guess you would call that major assignment of Module 1. So you're going to be asked to fill in a series of boxes. Each box will have a prompt. The prompt is based on the reading selection that you end up picking, whether you go with their reading selection, which I recommend because based on your answers to the 1-5 quiz, that reading selection will likely be the one that is most interesting to you. So you read the piece, and then you're going to respond to a series of questions in a series of boxes. Respond in as much detail as you can, really try to unpack your answers. And then once you've filled in all of the boxes, you will then download your responses into a Word document, and you're going to submit 1-7 writing notes, not through MindEdge, but through Brightspace. So you want to download it into a Word document, maybe touch it up, make sure that your paragraphs transition from one to the other by adding in transitional words or phrases, and then submit it via Brightspace, and I will assess it and get it back to you within 7 days. All assessments, the way that I assess anything that I'm given, I look at the assignment guidelines and rubric, and I assess you based on exactly what the assignment guidelines and rubric says. And those assignment guidelines and rubrics for every assignment, that assignment guidelines and rubrics are available. They're not only available to me, but they're available to you, so there's no mystery as to how I will grade something. In the next module that we'll get in for next week, it goes into reading deeper than just the surface, and that is an analytical approach, or close reading, you might have heard it called. And for that one, that's when you dig in and you start asking questions of a text. Like if you've ever read The Hunger Games, for example, the Mockingjay isn't just this surface thing it appears to be, but it's a symbolic of rebellion. Now, digging into that level, you're no longer at that surface level of reading. You are getting into the analytical level, the close reading of a text. Hopefully I didn't speak too quickly, and if you have any questions though, jot them down, bring them to class tomorrow, and I will start off class by answering any and all questions pertaining to Module 1.